Captain Riker Valencia watched as the escape pod's control panel flickered and died. The vessel shuddered violently as it pierced the atmosphere of the uncharted planet, a world of crimson skies and barren mountains that loomed ever closer through the viewport. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the manual controls, fighting to maintain some semblance of trajectory. Mayday, Mayday. This is Captain Valencia of the ESS Horizon. My coordinates are, the communication system sputtered and went dark. Not that it mattered, the Horizon had been destroyed hours ago, torn apart by the Velrathian warship that had appeared without warning at the edge of the Epsilon sector. There would be no rescue. The pod slammed into the planet's surface with enough force to knock Riker unconscious. When he awoke, pain lanced through his body. Blood trickled from a gash above his eye. The air that hissed through the pod's fractured hull was thin but breathable, carrying the scent of iron and unfamiliar minerals. Riker dragged himself from the wreckage, retrieving his plasma rifle and emergency kit. The landscape around him was desolate, jutting rock formations and rust-colored soil stretching toward distant mountains. The twin suns hanging in the sky cast long, ominous shadows across the terrain. He activated his locator beacon, though he knew it was futile. Even if Earth received his signal, he was far beyond any reasonable rescue timeframe. His mission had been simple reconnaissance, observe Velrathian fleet movements at the border of human territory. No one had expected them to push so far into the neutral zone. As Riker surveyed the horizon, seeking any sign of water or shelter, he noticed movement, a shimmer in the air like heat rising from sun-baked Earth. His military training kicked in, and he dropped to a crouch, rifle raised. The shimmer materialized into a hulking figure nearly 8 feet tall. The Velrathian warrior's exoskeleton armor gleamed dully in the alien sunlight, its insectoid helmet featuring multiple red sensor arrays where eyes should be. In one massive hand, it carried a weapon Riker recognized from military briefings, a sonic disruptor capable of liquefying a human's internal organs with a single blast. Human, the alien's voice emerged through a translator, somehow managing to inject contempt into the artificial tone. I am Hunt Commander Kazorn of the Velrathian Empire. Your presence violates the sovereign territory of Emperor Vexthalion. Riker steadied his breathing. This sector isn't Velrathian territory according to the Arcturus Treaty. Treaties change, Kazorn replied, the translator conveying a cold amusement. Your ship was warned. Its destruction was justified. 300 people, Riker growled, anger rising in his chest. You killed 300 innocent people. Casualties of war. The alien warrior raised its weapon. You will be the last. Riker fired first, the plasma bolt striking the Velrathian's shoulder armor. The alien staggered but didn't fall. What followed was a desperate battle across the rocky terrain, Riker using the landscape for cover while Kazorn's superior strength and technology gave it the advantage. A blast from the sonic disruptor caught Riker's leg, sending waves of excruciating pain through his body. He collapsed behind a boulder, gasping for breath in the thin air. His rifle's charge indicator blinked red, nearly depleted. Your species intrigues us, Kazorn said, approaching steadily. So fragile, yet so persistent. It is why you must be eliminated before your expansion threatens our dominion. Riker's vision blurred. The alien atmosphere was affecting him strangely, colors seemed more vivid, sounds sharper. He could hear the Velrathian's breathing apparatus and the subtle hydraulic movements of its armor joints. The hunt ends, Kazorn declared, raising the disruptor for a killing blow. With his remaining strength, Riker lunged forward, firing his last plasma charge point-blank at the alien's helmet. The sensor array shattered, and Kazorn roared in pain, blindly striking out. A massive armored fist connected with Riker's chest, sending him flying backward into a rock formation. Bones cracked. Blood filled his mouth. The world darkened around him as Kazorn approached, now wielding a ceremonial blade. Your valor is noted, human. I will record it in the Imperial Archives. Riker lay broken, barely conscious. The strange energies of the planet seemed to pulse through the ground beneath him, into his shattered body. His heartbeat slowed. Then stopped. Kazorn turned away, following Velrathian protocol to record the coordinates of the kill. Victory was absolute. Then, a sound, a gasping intake of breath. The alien warrior spun around, disbelieving. Captain Riker Valencia was on his feet, blood streaming from his wounds, eyes blazing with an unnatural amber light. The human's broken limbs were straightening, bones visibly knitting beneath torn flesh. Impossible, Kazorn whispered, the translator failing to hide genuine fear. Riker didn't understand what was happening to him, only that the pain was receding, replaced by a surge of power unlike anything he'd ever experienced. The planet itself seemed to be fueling him, its strange energy flowing into his cells, repairing, enhancing. You're right about one thing, Riker said, his voice stronger than before. This hunt isn't over. Kazorn raised his weapon again, but for the first time in his distinguished career as an Imperial hunt commander, the Velrathian warrior felt something alien to his kind, doubt. Hunt Commander Kazorn had never retreated from prey before. It violated every principle of the Velrathian warrior code. Yet as the human charged forward with impossible speed, eyes glowing with the amber energy of Nexus 12's rare atmospheric compound, the veteran hunter made a tactical decision. He activated his armor's emergency thrusters and launched backward, giving himself distance. The human, this Riker Valencia, was no longer the same creature he had nearly killed moments ago. Something fundamental had changed. What are you? Kazorn demanded, his translator struggling to convey his mixture of disgust and fascination. Riker looked down at his hands, watching as the last of his wounds sealed themselves. The twin sun's light seemed to bend around him, creating an almost imperceptible aura. I don't know, he answered truthfully. But I'm not dying today. The Velrathian warrior's helmet was damaged, one sensor array completely dark, but the remaining optical inputs analyzed Riker's biological signature. The readings were unprecedented, cellular regeneration accelerated beyond any known species' capability, metabolic processes operating at impossible efficiency. The High Command would want this specimen alive for study. Kazorn fired a capture net, its metallic mesh designed to incapacitate through neurological disruption. Riker dodged with reflexes he'd never possessed before, the net snagging on a rock formation behind him. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward a narrow canyon to the east, instinctively seeking terrain that would neutralize the Velrathian's superior weaponry. Your flight is futile, human. Kazorn bellowed, activating his armor's pursuit mode. The exoskeleton hummed as auxiliary power rerouted to locomotion systems. This entire planet will become your tomb. Riker's mind raced as fast as his feet. The military briefings on Velrathian physiology had been limited, 4 times human strength, enhanced sensory capabilities, exoskeletons even without armor. But they had weaknesses too. Their massive size made them less agile in confined spaces, and their metabolism required more oxygen than humans, making them susceptible to fatigue in low-oxygen environments. The canyon narrowed as Riker pushed deeper into its winding confines. The rust-colored stone rose hundreds of feet on either side, occasionally forcing him to squeeze through gaps barely wide enough for his shoulders. Behind him, he could hear Kazorn's frustrated roars as the warrior was forced to remove pieces of his bulky armor to continue the pursuit. As he ran, Riker became increasingly aware of strange sensations. The planet's energy wasn't just healing him, it was changing him. He could feel vibrations through the soles of his boots, sensing Kazorn's movements with preternatural accuracy. The air tasted different, each component distinguishable on his tongue, nitrogen, oxygen, and something else, something unique that seemed to sing in his blood. The canyon opened into a vast basin scattered with crystalline formations that glowed with a soft amber light identical to the color that now infused Riker's irises. He paused, drawn to one of the crystals. When his fingers brushed its surface, images flooded his mind, ancient structures, beings of pure energy, technologies beyond human comprehension. The ancestors, he whispered, the knowledge appearing in his mind from nowhere. This planet had been home to a civilization millions of years extinct, but their legacy remained in these crystals, in the energy that permeated the atmosphere. A sonic blast shattered the crystal inches from Riker's hand, fragmenting it into glittering dust that swirled around him like a miniature galaxy. "Step away from the resonance crystal, human," Kazorn commanded, emerging from the canyon's mouth. He had discarded much of his external armor, revealing the natural chitin plating beneath, iridescent black with streaks of crimson along the joints. Without his helmet, Kazorn's face was exposed, mandibles flanking a vertical mouth, for recessed eyes positioned for maximum visual coverage, and sensory antennae that twitched constantly, sampling the air. "The Velrathian Empire claims all ancestor artifacts," the alien continued, advancing cautiously. "Your contamination of this site is another violation of Imperial law." Riker backed away, acutely aware that despite his new abilities, Kazorn remained lethal. "Your empire doesn't own this place," he said. "And it doesn't own me either." "Incorrect. You became Imperial property the moment your ship violated our space. We were in neutral territory. A convenient fiction maintained to placate your species while we prepared for the inevitable conflict." Kazorn gestured toward the distant horizon. "Already, colony ships approach. This world's resources will fuel the next phase of Velrathian expansion." The revelation hit Riker like a physical blow. The reconnaissance mission, the treaty negotiations, all a sham while the Velrathians positioned themselves for war. Millions would die if Earth remained unprepared. Riker's hand closed around a fragment of the shattered crystal. Instantly, knowledge flowed into him. The crystal could amplify the energy already transforming him, potentially magnifying his new abilities. But there would be consequences. The further he moved from his humanity, the harder it would be to return. He didn't hesitate. As Kazorn lunged forward, Riker pressed the crystal against his chest. Pain beyond imagination seared through him, dropping him to his knees. The alien warrior seized the opportunity, closing the distance with predatory efficiency. "A pity," Kazorn said, standing over Riker's convulsing form. "I had hoped to present you conscious to our scientists." Through the haze of agony, Riker felt the crystal dissolving, its ancient energy merging with his cellular structure. The ground beneath him trembled, then cracked as amber light erupted from the fissures. Kazorn stumbled backward, mandibles flaring in alarm. The basin's crystals were responding, all pulsing in synchronization with Riker's heartbeat. The warrior's survival instincts screamed danger, but scientific curiosity kept him from fleeing immediately. No Velrathian had ever witnessed such integration with ancestor technology. When Riker stood, the transformation was evident. Crystalline patterns traced his skin like luminous veins. His eyes blazed with ancestral knowledge. The atmosphere around him distorted, gravity itself bending to his unconscious will. "What have you done?" Kazorn demanded, genuine fear in his voice for the first time. Riker didn't answer with words. Instead, he extended his hand, and a shockwave of force flung the Velrathian warrior across the basin. Kazorn crashed into a crystal formation, his natural armor cracking from the impact. The alien rose unsteadily, dark ichor seeping from a wound in his side. For the first time in his distinguished combat history, Hunt Commander Kazorn of the 7th Imperial Legion chose to retreat. His secondary heart pumped furiously as he bounded toward a narrow crevice in the basin wall, a tactical withdrawal to reassess and report this unprecedented development to the fleet. Riker watched him go, suddenly exhausted as the crystal's energy stabilized within him. The knowledge of the ancestors whispered in his mind, fragments of a vast cosmic puzzle. One certainty emerged clearly: this conflict was larger than human versus Velrathian. Something ancient was awakening on this planet, and both species were unwitting players in a game set in motion eons ago. In the crimson sky above, a shooting star marked the arrival of another Velrathian drop pod. The hunt was about to become more complicated. The crimson landscape blurred around Riker as he ran, each step carrying him farther than should have been physically possible. The ancestor crystal's energy had fundamentally altered his relationship with the planet's physics. The crystalline patterns beneath his skin pulsed with amber light when he exerted himself, providing glimpses of his new limitations, which extended far beyond his previous human capabilities. He paused atop a ridge, surveying the territory. In the distance, the fresh Velrathian drop pod smoldered in its impact crater, a plume of dark smoke rising into the alien sky. Around it, figures moved with military precision, establishing a perimeter. Through his enhanced vision, Riker counted 6 warriors, each bearing the distinctive insignia of the Velrathian elite guard. Perfect, he muttered. One alien hunter had nearly killed him before his transformation. Now an entire squad had arrived, undoubtedly equipped with technology specifically designed to capture or eliminate him. A sound behind him, the subtle shift of gravel beneath careful steps. Riker spun to find Kazorn emerging from behind a rocky outcropping, wounded but still dangerous. The Velrathian carried a ceremonial blade rather than his disruptor, suggesting his more advanced weapons had been damaged in their earlier encounter. Impressive adaptation, human, Kazorn said, keeping a cautious distance. Dark ichor still seeped from the crack in his natural armor, but his stance remained predatory. The resonance crystal should have killed you. Sorry to disappoint. Riker readied himself for another attack, the crystal energy within him responding to his adrenaline spike. Your reinforcements won't save you. They are not here for me. Kazorn tilted his head toward the drop pod in the distance. They hunt something else. A roar shook the air, primeval and terrifying, originating from beyond the ridge. Both warriors instinctively crouched lower. Nexus Stalker, Kazorn explained, mandibles clicking with tension. Apex predator of this region. Your transformation has awakened it from hibernation. The resonance energy calls to it. As if summoned by the alien's words, a massive creature crested the ridge. It resembled a prehistoric Earth reptile, but with significant alien divergences, multiple sets of luminous eyes, armored plates interspersed with crystalline growths identical to those now embedded in Riker's skin, and 6 powerful limbs tipped with claws that could shred metal. The stalker's attention fixed on Riker, attracted by the ancestor energy radiating from him. It charged with shocking speed for its massive bulk. Riker dodged the initial attack, using his newfound abilities to leap 20 feet laterally. The stalker skidded, adjusting its trajectory with frightening intelligence. Its next lunge caught Riker off guard, one massive claw slashing across his chest. He expected pain, but instead watched in astonishment as his crystalline skin hardened instantaneously, deflecting the attack with a shower of amber sparks. Kazorn hadn't fled. The Velrathian warrior observed the confrontation with analytical precision, noting how the human's augmented physiology responded to threat. When the stalker circled back for another attack on Riker, Kazorn made a decision that would have shocked his Imperial commanders. He joined the fight. The Velrathian leapt onto the creature's armored back, driving his ceremonial blade into a vulnerable joint between plates. The stalker howled, rearing up and thrashing to dislodge this new attacker. Riker seized the opportunity, concentrating the ancestor energy into his palm and releasing it as a concussive blast against the predator's exposed underbelly. The creature staggered but didn't fall. With terrifying flexibility, it twisted its body to snap at Kazorn with multiple rows of crystalline teeth. The alien warrior barely evaded the bite, but lost his grip and tumbled to the ground. Before the stalker could press its advantage, Riker was there, placing himself between Predator and Velrathian. Move, human. Kazorn growled, struggling to rise with his injury. "Shut up and help me kill this thing," Riker replied, maintaining his defensive stance. The stalker circled them, intelligent enough to recognize that its prey was now coordinating. When it attacked again, it employed strategy, feinting toward Kazorn before suddenly pivoting to charge Riker. The battle that followed was brutal and exhausting. Twice the stalker nearly secured lethal strikes, only to be thwarted by the unexpected cooperation of human and Velrathian. Riker's energy blasts weakened the creature, while Kazorn's knowledge of xenobiology allowed him to target vulnerable points in its anatomy. Finally, with a synchronized attack, Riker channeling energy threw his fist into the creature's jaw while Kazorn drove his blade deep into its primary heart, the stalker collapsed. Its multiple eyes dimmed as crystalline fluid pooled beneath its massive form. Riker and Kazorn faced each other across the creature's body, both breathing heavily. The temporary alliance left them in uncharted territory. By Velrathian combat doctrine, Kazorn should immediately resume his attempt to capture or kill the human. By human military protocol, Riker should eliminate the alien threat while he had the advantage. Instead, Kazorn spoke first. "Your resonance signature saved both our lives." The stalker's hide would have deflected conventional weapons. Riker nodded cautiously. "And your knowledge of its anatomy made the difference. I would have been attacking it blindly." A tense silence followed, broken only by the distant sounds of Velrathian search parties. The elite guard would eventually track them here. "They will take us both," Kazorn said finally. "You as a specimen, me as a traitor for fighting alongside prey." "Traitor?" Riker asked, surprised. "You were ensuring your survival." "Irrelevant. Cooperation with lesser species, especially during active conquest, violates Imperial battle code." The alien warrior's mandibles twitched in what Riker somehow recognized as resignation. "My honor is compromised." Riker considered their situation. The crystal's energy had not only changed his body but was expanding his consciousness, allowing him to perceive patterns and possibilities previously invisible. One fact became increasingly clear: neither of them would survive long alone. "What if there's another option?" he suggested. "Neither of us returns to our people as captives." Kazorn regarded him with multiple eyes that revealed nothing of his thoughts. "What alternative exists on this hostile world?" "We work together." The words felt strange leaving Riker's mouth, proposing alliance with the same species that had destroyed his ship and killed his crew. Yet the crystal's influence whispered that larger forces were at work. "At least until we understand what's happening here." To emphasize his point, Riker gestured to the fallen stalker. The creature's crystalline components were pulsing with increasing intensity, the energy within them seeking new vessels. Already, smaller lifeforms were approaching cautiously, native scavengers drawn to the resonance power being released. "The ancestor energy is destabilizing," Kazorn observed. "This region will soon become uninhabitable as predators evolve through crystal absorption." "Then we need to move," Riker said. "The crash of my escape pod, our battle, this creature's death, we're leaving a trail of energy signatures that your elite guard can follow." The Velrathian warrior remained silent for several moments, his cultural programming battling against survival instinct. Finally, he reached a decision, extending a three-fingered hand in what he knew was a human gesture of agreement. "Until the elite guard is evaded," Kazorn stipulated, "and not a moment longer." Riker accepted the alien's hand, noting how the crystalline patterns on his skin briefly flared at the contact. "Agreed." As they departed the ridge, moving away from both the stalker's corpse and the Velrathian search parties, neither warrior noticed the subtle changes occurring where their hands had briefly touched, Riker's crystalline patterns momentarily transferring to Kazorn's chitin armor, and microscopic fragments of Velrathian biology adhering to Riker's transformed skin. The ancestor energy was not merely changing them individually, it was creating something new from their unlikely connection, a hybrid resonance that rippled outward across the planet's surface, activating dormant crystal formations buried deep beneath the ancient soil. Miles away, in a vast underground chamber untouched for millennia, a central crystal pillar illuminated in response. 3 days of cautious travel had brought Riker and Kazorn to the foothills of a mountain range where massive crystal formations jutted from the rock like ancient sentinels. Their unlikely partnership had evolved from tense cooperation to something approaching mutual respect, though neither would openly acknowledge it. They had evaded 2 Velrathian search parties by using Kazorn's knowledge of Imperial tracking protocols combined with Riker's increasingly intuitive control of the resonance energy within him. Each night, they had huddled in caves or natural shelters, sharing minimal conversation but gradually accumulating small insights into each other's species. "Your kind breathes inefficiently," Kazorn observed as they rested in the shadow of a towering crystal spire. "One respiratory system, one heart. Redundancy is essential for evolutionary dominance." Riker smiled wryly. "Yet somehow we've managed to build an interstellar civilization that has your empire worried enough to violate treaties." The Velrathian's mandibles clicked. What Riker had learned was a sign of contemplation rather than aggression. "It is not your technology that concerns the High Command. It is your adaptability." He gestured to Riker's transformed physiology. "As you have demonstrated." The crystals embedded in Riker's skin had stabilized, no longer pulsing constantly but illuminating in response to his emotional state or when he channeled their energy. He had discovered, through careful experimentation, that he could now manipulate gravitational fields in a limited radius, enhance his physical attributes temporarily, and perceive energy signatures invisible to normal human senses. "Speaking of the High Command," Riker said, "you mentioned colony ships approaching. An invasion force?" Kazorn hesitated, his loyalty to the Empire warring with the reality of his situation. "The Emperor believes humans will eventually challenge Velrathian dominance of this sector. The decision was made to strike first, using this planet as a forward base." "But why this planet specifically? There are dozens of worlds better suited for colonization." Before Kazorn could answer, the ground trembled beneath them. Not a natural seismic event, the vibration had a pattern, a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. Both warriors rose instantly, alert to danger. The massive crystal beside them began to resonate, emitting a harmonic tone that made Riker's embedded crystals vibrate in sympathy. Without warning, a beam of amber light shot from the spire directly into Riker's chest, knocking him backward. Kazorn moved to attack the crystal, interpreting it as a threat, but Riker raised a hand to stop him. "Wait," he gasped. "It's communicating." Images flooded Riker's consciousness, not random fragments like before, but a coherent narrative. The ancestors, a species of energy beings who had evolved beyond physical form, had seeded compatible worlds with resonance crystals as repositories for their consciousness and knowledge. This planet, which they called Nexus, was a nexus point in their network, a library world containing the sum of their civilization's wisdom. But something had gone wrong. Another entity, parasitic, ancient, and hungry, had found the crystal network. Unable to access it directly, this entity had searched for biological vessels that could serve as conduits. It had found the Velrathians. The vision shifted, showing Riker the Imperial Palace on the Velrathian homeworld. At its center sat not the Emperor that Kazorn believed he served, but a monstrous, shapeless presence that had taken the Emperor's form, infiltrating Velrathian society at its highest level. For generations, this entity had subtly manipulated the Empire's expansion, guiding them toward worlds containing ancestor crystals, using the Velrathians to harvest and transport the crystals back to the Imperial core worlds. Each crystal absorbed increased the entity's power and awareness, bringing it closer to its ultimate goal, accessing the complete ancestor network and ascending to godhood. The beam of light retracted, leaving Riker gasping on his knees. Kazorn approached cautiously. "What happened?" "Your crystalline structures changed configuration." Riker looked up at his alien companion, seeing him with new understanding. Your emperor isn't who, or what, you think he is. Over the next hour, Riker explained the vision, watching as Kazorn's posture shifted from skepticism to horror. The alien warrior had served the Empire with unwavering loyalty for decades, believing in its mission of expansion as a natural right of Velrathian superiority. The suggestion that his entire civilization had been manipulated by a parasitic entity was more than mere blasphemy, it was reality-shattering. Impossible, Kazorn insisted, though his multiple eyes darted nervously. Our imperial bloodline is pure, documented for 12 generations. When did your species first discover resonance crystals? Riker asked, following an intuition from the ancestor knowledge now flowing through him. Kazorn tilted his head, mandibles working as he accessed his historical training. Approximately 12 generations ago. The first emperor discovered a meteorite containing crystalline structures that granted him unprecedented mental capabilities. He unified our previously warring clans and established the modern empire. Not a meteorite, Riker said quietly. An ancestor seed pod, designed to establish contact with promising species. But it was intercepted. As if triggered by these words, the crystalline patterns on Riker's skin flared brilliantly. Simultaneously, microscopic crystal fragments that had transferred to Kazorn's exoskeleton during their earlier physical contact began to glow, spreading across the Velrathian's natural armor in intricate patterns. Kazorn staggered, chitinous hands clutching his head. What? What is happening to me? The ancestors are showing you the truth, Riker explained, recognizing the process from his own experience. They need you to see. The alien warrior fell to his knees, body convulsing as centuries of carefully constructed imperial propaganda dissolved under the weight of undeniable truth. Riker watched, understanding the profound crisis of identity his companion was experiencing. To learn that one's entire civilization, one's very purpose, had been constructed by an entity that viewed your species as nothing more than convenient tools, it was devastating. When the resonance energy finally stabilized, Kazorn looked up with altered eyes. Flecks of amber now interrupted the solid black of his multiple irises. The High Command, he whispered, voice hollow with horror. They are not themselves. I have seen it in council meetings, moments when the Emperor's form seemed to fluctuate. We attributed it to the sacred energy that sustains the imperial bloodline. Not sacred energy, Riker said. Parasitic possession. The Velrathian warrior rose unsteadily, his worldview irreparably shattered. If what you say is true, if what I have seen is real, then my duty to the Empire demands I act. The true Velrathian civilization must be liberated from this corruption. It's not just your civilization at stake, Riker added. If this entity gains access to the complete ancestor network, it will have power beyond comprehension. Earth, Velrath, and countless other worlds would be at its mercy. As they contemplated this grim reality, a new tremor shook the ground, stronger, more focused than before. The massive crystal spire beside them began to descend into the earth, revealing a previously hidden entrance to what appeared to be an ancient structure buried beneath the mountain. The ancestors are guiding us, Riker realized, feeling the resonance energy pulling him toward the opening. Kazorn studied the alien architecture now exposed before them, geometric patterns that matched no known Velrathian aesthetic, composed of materials that seemed to exist simultaneously as solid matter and pure energy. If we enter, the warrior said hesitantly, we cannot return to who we were. Riker nodded, understanding that this moment represented a final commitment. I think we left those people behind the moment we met. Together, the human and the Velrathian stepped into the ancestor structure, the entrance sealing behind them as they descended into pulsing amber light. Above them, the twin suns of Nexus aligned in a celestial configuration that occurred once every 1,000 years, bathing the planet in intensified radiation that activated dormant crystal networks buried beneath the surface. On his flagship orbiting the planet, Admiral Vexthalion, or the entity wearing his form, sensed the awakening of the ancestor complex. Its amorphous true self writhed within the confines of its Velrathian host, anticipating the imminent harvest of power that would enable its final ascension. What it could not anticipate was that its carefully orchestrated plans now faced an unprecedented variable, a human Velrathian resonance bond, the first of its kind in the universe's history. The ancestor complex stretched for miles beneath the planet's surface, a labyrinth of crystalline chambers and pulsing energy conduits connecting to a central core. As Riker and Kazorn traversed its otherworldly architecture, their transformed bodies resonated with the structure itself, doors opening at their approach, holographic displays activating to guide their journey. "My entire life," Kazorn said, mandibles clicking with awe as they entered a vast spherical chamber filled with suspended crystal fragments that formed a three-dimensional stellar map, "I was taught that Velrathians alone were destined for galactic dominance. That our biological superiority made conquest our birthright." Riker studied the alien's posture, once rigid with imperial military discipline, now softened by the weight of revelation. "And now? Now I understand we are merely one of countless species, each with potential the ancestors recognized." The warrior gestured toward the stellar map, where thousands of worlds glowed with the signature amber light of resonance crystals. "The entity controlling my emperor wishes to harvest this network to become a god. But the ancestors intended it as a shared legacy for all sentient life." They continued deeper, guided by intuitive knowledge flowing from their crystalline implants. Riker's transformation had stabilized, granting him control over gravitational fields and enhanced physical capabilities without the painful fluctuations of earlier days. Kazorn's changes were more subtle but equally profound, his natural armor now interlaced with crystalline structures that amplified his strength and allowed him limited telepathic connection with Riker. Their destination revealed itself as a massive hemispherical chamber at the planet's core. At its center stood a colossal crystal pillar reaching from floor to ceiling, pulsing with energy that made the air itself shimmer. Surrounding it in concentric circles were smaller crystals, each connected to the central pillar by threads of light that resembled a vast neural network. The nexus point, Riker breathed, understanding flowing into him from the ancestor consciousness. This is what it wants. From here, it could access every resonance crystal in the galaxy. Kazorn approached a control interface, a floating crystalline polyhedron that rotated in response to his proximity. The ancestors built this as a library and communication network, not a weapon. But in the entity's control, it becomes a tool for universal domination, Riker finished. "We need to." A violent tremor interrupted him, nearly knocking both warriors off their feet. The crystal network flared with crimson energy, overriding the natural amber glow. "It's here," Kazorn hissed, instinctively drawing his ceremonial blade. "The entity has found the nexus." The far wall of the chamber disintegrated, revealing a Velrathian assault squad led by a figure that resembled Admiral Vex Thalion in form only. The Admiral's body moved with unnatural fluidity, joints bending in impossible directions. Behind him, a dozen elite guards stood with weapons ready, their eyes vacant, crystalline implants protruding from their skulls, direct neural interfaces through which the entity controlled them like puppets. "Hunt Commander Kazorn," the Admiral's voice echoed with multiple overlapping tones, "your treachery disappoints but does not surprise. Lesser species have always inspired irrational sympathy among the weak-minded." Kazorn straightened to his full height, mandibles flaring in challenge. "I serve the true Velrathian Empire, not the parasite that wears our Emperor's face." The Admiral's form rippled, momentarily revealing the amorphous horror beneath its Velrathian disguise, a writhing mass of tendrils and eyes, ancient beyond comprehension. "I have guided your pathetic species from barbarism to interstellar relevance. Your gratitude should be eternal. You've used us as harvesting tools," Kazorn snarled, "mining these crystals to feed your ascension while keeping us ignorant of their true purpose." The entity laughed, a sound like glass shattering. The crystals were wasted on the ancestors, beings who achieved godhood only to squander it on cosmic libraries and evolutionary guidance projects. It gestured dismissively toward Riker. They even believed humans might one day join their pantheon. Such misplaced faith. Riker felt the ancestor knowledge stirring within him, connecting fragments into coherent understanding. That's why you targeted Earth, he realized. Not because we threatened Velrathian expansion, but because the ancestors chose us as potential inheritors. Potential that will never be realized, the entity replied. Your species will be harvested for biomass once I access the complete network. The crystalline evolution you've experienced is merely a preview of my power. Without warning, the possessed admiral thrust a hand forward. Crimson energy erupted from his palm, striking Riker with devastating force. The human would have been vaporized instantly if not for his transformation. Instead, the crystalline patterns on his skin absorbed the attack, though the impact still threw him across the chamber. Kazorn charged, ceremonial blade augmented by amber energy that flowed from his own crystal implants. The elite guards moved to intercept, but their movements were sluggish compared to Kazorn's enhanced reflexes. He dispatched 3 warriors in rapid succession, each strike severing the parasitic crystal implants controlling them rather than delivering fatal wounds. The entity howled with rage, the Admiral's form beginning to dissolve as it struggled to contain the parasite's true manifestation. Tendrils of oily darkness erupted from the Velrathian's flesh, lashing out at Kazorn with terrible precision. One tendril pierced the warrior's shoulder, injecting parasitic essence that began corrupting his crystal implants, turning their amber glow to sickly crimson. Across the chamber, Riker recovered from the initial blast. He saw Kazorn's predicament and understood what was happening. The entity was attempting to assimilate the warrior directly, converting him into another puppet. Without conscious thought, Riker channeled the ancestor energy within him, creating a gravitational distortion that ripped the tendril free from Kazorn's body. The central pillar. Riker shouted, memories from the ancestor consciousness guiding his understanding. It can either grant access to the network or seal it permanently. Kazorn nodded, fighting through the pain of his corrupted implants. They needed to reach the control interface, but the entity and its remaining guards stood directly in their path. What followed was a desperate battle across the chamber floor, Riker using his gravitational manipulation to create shields and weapons of pure force, Kazorn employing centuries of combat experience enhanced by ancestor technology. The entity grew increasingly desperate as it realized their intentions. It abandoned all pretense of humanity, shedding the Admiral's form entirely to reveal its true self, a nightmarish configuration of non-Euclidean geometry and pulsing negative energy. In this form, it launched a psychic assault on both warriors, bombarding their minds with visions of cosmic horror and existential despair. Riker staggered under the mental onslaught, nearly succumbing to the entity's influence. In that moment of weakness, he felt Kazorn's consciousness touch his own through their crystalline connection, not with imperial combat protocols or alien strategic thinking, but with something profoundly personal, memories of his hatching brood, of his first hunt, of quiet moments contemplating Velrathian poetry beneath triple moons. These intimate recollections anchored Riker to reality, allowing him to push back against the entity's psychic attack. Simultaneously, Riker shared his own core memories, his parents' farm in the Midwest, his first spacewalk during academy training, the camaraderie of his crew aboard the Horizon. These human experiences flowed into Kazorn's mind, reinforcing his resistance to the entity's corruption. This unexpected psychic bond, human and Velrathian memories intertwining, created a resonance frequency that the entity couldn't penetrate. Working in perfect synchronization, they fought their way to the control interface, each defending the other with increasingly intuitive coordination. The sequence requires simultaneous activation, Kazorn shouted as they finally reached the crystal polyhedron, his hands hovering over one facet while Riker positioned himself at the opposite side. The entity howled, recognizing its imminent defeat. In a final desperate assault, it channeled all its accumulated power into a blast of corrupting energy aimed at the central pillar itself. If it couldn't control the network, it would destroy it, denying the ancestors' legacy to all future civilizations. Without hesitation, Riker threw himself into the path of the blast. The crystal structures in his body absorbed the full force of the attack, his transformed physiology channeling the corrupting energy through his system. Pain beyond imagination ripped through him as the conflicting energies, ancestor and parasite, battled for dominance within his cellular structure. Now, he screamed to Kazorn, his body beginning to fracture as amber light poured from widening fissures in his skin. The Velrathian warrior pressed his palms against the interface, initiating the sequence. The central pillar flared with blinding intensity, sending pulses of purifying energy outward through the chamber and beyond, to every crystal on the planet, to every infected Velrathian ship in orbit, and through subspace pathways to the Imperial homeworld itself. The entity writhed in agony as its parasitic extensions were systematically purged from the network. Its physical form began to collapse, dimensions folding inward as the very laws of physics reasserted themselves against its unnatural existence. "This changes nothing," it shrieked, voice distorting as it compressed into a singularity of malevolence. "I have existed for eons before your species crawled from primordial oceans. I will return." With a final implosion of anti-energy, the entity vanished, not destroyed, perhaps, but banished to a dimensional void from which escape would take millennia, if it was possible at all. In the sudden silence, Kazorn rushed to where Riker had collapsed. The human's transformation was accelerating beyond control, his body becoming more crystalline than organic with each passing second. "The ancestor consciousness is claiming you," Kazorn realized, recognizing the patterns from ancient Velrathian texts describing ascension. "You're becoming one of them." Riker smiled weakly, his features already hardening into crystalline permanence. "Not exactly. The network needs a guardian, someone who understands both human and Velrathian perspective. Someone who can ensure it's never exploited again." "You're sacrificing yourself," the warrior said, mandibles drooping in a gesture of profound respect. "Transforming," Riker corrected. "And not alone." He reached out with a hand that was now translucent crystal, touching Kazorn's shoulder where their implants had first begun to synchronize. "The Velrathians need a truth-bearer, someone who can guide them back to their true path now that the parasite's influence is gone." Understanding dawned in the alien's multifaceted eyes. A cultural reconstruction spanning generations. Who better than a hunt commander with first-hand knowledge of the ancestor legacy? Riker's form was now barely humanoid, more a crystalline construct shaped by memory of human configuration. Two species, two guardians, one purpose. Around them, the chamber began to reconfigure itself, the ancestor technology responding to Riker's transformation. Holographic displays activated, showing the Velrathian fleet in orbit, ships filled with confused warriors suddenly freed from the entity's subtle influence, the truth of their manipulation becoming clear as purified crystals throughout their vessels shared ancestor knowledge. "They will resist at first," Kazorn said, watching as his people faced a devastating cultural revelation. "Centuries of imperial doctrine cannot be undone in a moment." "That's why they need you," Riker replied, his voice now resonating directly in Kazorn's mind as his physical form completed its crystalline metamorphosis. "And why Earth will need to understand what happened here. Both our species were pawns in a cosmic game, but now we have the opportunity to become players." The central pillar pulsed once more, and Riker's crystalline form merged with it, his consciousness expanding beyond physical limitations to encompass the entire network. His last human thought was of the irony, that it took an alien threat to reveal the common ground between species who had viewed each other only as enemies. Kazorn stood alone in the chamber, yet not truly alone. Through their shared crystalline connection, he could still sense Riker's presence, not as a human captain nor as an ancestor entity, but as something unique, a bridge between worlds. The warrior bowed deeply, a gesture of respect rarely shown by Velrathians to any other species. Until we meet again, Captain Valencia. As Kazorn departed the chamber to begin his monumental task, rebuilding Velrathian society without the parasitic influence that had shaped it for generations, a subtle amber glow followed him, a permanent reminder of an unlikely alliance that had saved two civilizations from godlike manipulation. And deep within the crystalline network, Riker Valencia's consciousness began its work, not as a human, not as an ancestor, but as something the galaxy had never seen before, a guardian born of cosmic coincidence and battlefield camaraderie, ensuring that when humans and Velrathians eventually met again, it would be as equals in understanding, if not in form. In the space where the entity had vanished, a single dark crystal remained, a warning and a promise that some threats merely sleep rather than die, and that vigilance would be required for eons to come.